All right. Well, hi everyone. Like I said, I'm Amanda. Here I am. Here's my face, so you can see what I look like. I am a park ranger here at Dinosaur National Monument, and I'll be taking you guys on a tour of the monument today. Just a little bit about Dinosaur National Monument. Currently, we're in a building. I'm going to give you guys a whole tour of that. It is open to the public, so if you see people in the building at the same time, that's what's going on here. So you guys can see a little bit about what it looks like here. So we are located currently we are in Utah, and we're just gonna look out the window here so you can see a bit what it looks like. It is super smoky today, but it should give you a good idea of what the landscape out there looks like. So from my understanding, you guys are in a dinosaur class.
Yeah, we're basically in introductory geology, and
Perfect.
we have talked a little bit about how fossils form, but this is a great opportunity to see it in the field. And if you tell us a little bit about the setting of the
yeah, for sure,
and why you guys have fossils and the different types of fossils that you have.
Yeah, you got it. I'll try to keep it under an hour. So what we're looking at right now here at Dinosaur National Monument, the monument itself is over 200,000 acres. It spans from Utah into Colorado, and we have mostly sedimentary rock here. So you can actually see that if you're looking out the window, you can see, I'm going to try to point at it, behind this RV, there's a bunch of different rock layers here. So you can see that. Dinosaur National Monument actually has 23 different rock layers. And the one we're primarily going to be talking about today is called the Morrison Formation. But that is just one of the rock layers we have here. So we have many different rock layers that are exposed in a lot of different areas. There's two rivers that cut through the monument that also make a lot of those layers be exposed because they're cutting canyons through the layers.
And
what we're looking at here.
I'll just pause you for a minute.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it comes to my face when I speak, but those hills in the background, what you guys should be looking for, folks, is diagonal stripes. Those are the different layers of rocks that are going to be exposed inside.
Yeah. And so what we're looking at out here as well is we're actually seeing, this is part of a large anticline, basically a large fold in the rock. And so what that's doing is we're just seeing part of it here. It kind of makes this big thing and then goes out over here. So from our vantage point, we can only see part of that anticline. And that's why these rocks are tilted on this angle like that, because it's part of this much bigger curve. We're a little less smoky. You can actually see the kind of other side of this where it folds back up over here. But we're not able to really see that today. So the rock layer we're going to be talking about primarily is, you can kind of probably see out right by this RV, there's kind of this stripy, a red and tan layer, and the RV is going to pull right in front of it as we're talking. But that is the Morrison Formation. The Morrison Formation is kind of a famous layer that's known for its density of dinosaur fossils. It exists from a time period where there was a large river here. So a river about the size of the Mississippi River, basically a floodplain. So a good analogy today is thinking of like the African savanna today. Just instead of having animals that you find in Africa, there would have been a lot of dinosaurs. And so those are the animals we're finding the fossils of today. So I'm going to take a step back and turn so that you guys can see what is inside this building. So we were just looking out the window, and you should be able to see this building here. So today, the Morrison Formation, like I said, is known for its dinosaur fossils. And what we're looking at in the quarry today, this building you are visiting is called the Quarry Exhibit Hall. And today there's over 1,500 dinosaur bones preserved in the face of the quarry wall. I'll try to stop moving for a minute so you can actually see that. These are from 10 different kinds of dinosaurs. And essentially what happened here is that river, the floodplain I mentioned, had periods of drought and periods of flood. So during a drought time period, and I'll talk about how we know this in just a second. During a drought time period, all these dinosaurs died and were basically washed down when the water came back. And so what we're seeing today is essentially a log jam like you'd see on a river today of dinosaur fossils.
Are we able to get the view any closer just to see?
Yes, we will. We're actually going to climb up on the wall in a little bit, so you'll be able to see them. Yeah, we'll be able to see them quite a bit closer. But this is now just for some perspective. Yeah. So as I mentioned, there's 10 different kinds of dinosaurs, and what you find is just really big bits and pieces that are kind of mixed together. So we find articulated, lifelike bones from pieces that basically had a lot of connective tissue. So this is like a tailbone from a long-necked dinosaur called a Diplodocus. And you'll see just kind of random bits and pieces. This building is called the Quarry Exhibit Hall, to answer that question that just came up in the chat. And this is really what Dinosaur National Monument is known for. So people come here from all over the world to see dinosaurs in the place that they were found. So we're gonna go over here for a minute and just take a look at this mural. So this mural is just an artist's depiction of what we think it looked like 150 million years ago here. So there were, like I said, 10 different kinds of dinosaurs that are found in the quarry, but there are certainly other animals there as well. So we find fossils from crocodiles and from turtles. So here's a turtle fossil, so you guys can see that. Here is a baby turtle, which is super cute, little guy down there. And then there's several bits and pieces. These are both bits from a crocodile, that you can see here. Because of that river and the log jam scenario, basically we find pieces of bones from some of the more delicate animals instead of finding like full skeletons. And then this one, this is a little clam. And the clam is actually, these clam fossils are actually one of the reasons, that story I mentioned about the drought and flood. One of the reasons we know that is because of these clam fossils. So the clams that we find here are all fossilized open. So basically what that tells us is that they were living in the river, they were fine, and then the drought caused them to dry up, open, and die. And then they were recovered by water. So the clam fossils are actually telling us a whole lot about that environment, and telling us the story of how this came to be, by just taking a look at these little clams that don't seem so exciting in the beginning. All right. So we're going to go back over to our scan, and I usually open it up for you guys. So if anybody could tell me what a fossil actually is, you can go ahead and unmute and tell me what you think about that. Don't all jump in at once.
Yeah, I'm going to encourage you, if anybody, you can type it in the chat if you want, or just go ahead and unmute.
Are you all sleeping?
While people think about that, we actually have somebody asking what your job title is.
Oh, my job title, I am an interpretive park ranger. What that means is my job is to do education. So my degree is in environmental science, which basically means I took a lot of geology and biology.
And can you see the chat, Amanda?
Yes. Okay. So a lot of people said a fossil is a bone. And yes, it is a bone, but it can be other things. So impression of an organism. Awesome. Anybody else have anything to add on that? Remains of an organism. Nice. Preserved remains or traces of an organism. Yeah. Awesome. So it seems like you guys had the idea there, but a good way to think about a fossil, like a big picture, what's a fossil? A fossil is really any sign of ancient life. So it could be a dinosaur bone. It could be something a little bit like a trace fossil, which is basically a trace that an animal left behind. So it's not from their actual body, it's not a bone, but it's a trace they left behind. So can you guys type in chat, what do you think is a good example of a trace fossil? What do you think, anything you could think of that would be an example of a trace fossil? Yeah, awesome. I'm seeing a lot of answers saying footprints, and you guys are totally correct. Here is a dinosaur footprint. Okay. So this is a good example of a trace fossil. So it's not from the dinosaur's body, it's not its actual bone, but it's a trace of what they left behind. Trace fossils are my personal favorite fossils because I just think it's really incredible to think that this dinosaur was walking here, it left a footprint, and then it just continued on with its life, right? Like it didn't just leave behind its bones when it's died. It actually was living and walking along there.
And I'm
And
just
trace
gonna,
fossils, oh, go ahead.
so that was a cool one you held up. Was that actually a real fossil though?
It was not. No, I wouldn't be holding it quite like that with one hand if it was. Yeah, the real fossils are, if it was rock, it would be much heavier.
But yeah, it's a cast of a real fossil probably, right?
Yeah, for sure. So trace fossils can tell us a lot about dinosaur behavior, right? Like they can tell us maybe what they were doing. A body fossil, a bone, wouldn't really be able to tell us a lot about that unless it was something about the way they died that could tell us a little bit about that. But a trace fossil can tell us about dinosaur behavior. Were they traveling together in groups? Were they hunting? Were they just walking along? Were they, we can also look at coprolites, which is fossilized poop, to learn a lot about like what dinosaurs were eating and what they were doing with their life. So trace fossils can tell us a lot about that. We don't have a lot of trace fossils here specifically because of that river environment. It was kind of constantly moving. So we don't really have a lot of that. We also don't have dinosaur eggs. I saw that come up. Dinosaur eggs, we don't have them here because of that same scenario, right? This is a big river. It would have washed all that stuff away. So that's why we don't have those. That footprint I showed you guys was from a large theropod, which is a carnivorous dinosaur. Cool. Awesome. So to talk about body fossils really quick, it sounds like you guys are just getting introduced to this, but I'll go ahead and just give you my version of that review. So to have a body fossil, basically a dinosaur bone, become fossilized, it takes a couple of like important steps for that to happen, right? So first off, animal has to die. This is a body fossil, it's from their own body, so it has to die, right? So this is a cow bone, so you guys can get an idea of this. And I'm gonna hold this up to the camera and hopefully you should be able to see if it focuses properly. But the inside of the bone is really spongy. It's
probably, draw
back
back just an inch.
Yeah, I was gonna say. It's a little different what it does on Zoom versus some of the other platforms, so I'm not as familiar with how it's gonna focus. Okay, let me try even further back. So you can see the outside of the bone is smooth, but the inside of the bone is actually hollow. And this is where, like in our bones, like the blood and bone marrow is. So our bones have this kind of hollow inside as well. So for something to become a fossil, for step one, it has to die. Okay. Step two, it has to be buried in something, right? If it was just laying out in the sun, that animal is never going to become a fossil. It's probably just going to decompose and you'll never see it. This is a cow femur. Yeah, good question. So second step, it has to be buried. And buried usually in some kind of water, right? So a river in this case, or a lake or even an ocean. And what that does is if the bone is buried, those hollow spaces start to fill in with mud. And over a long time, millions of years, the mud actually turns into rock and starts to replace the minerals in the bone itself. So when you get a fossil, essentially it's like a half bone, half rock. That's a little oversimplified, but it gives you the general idea of what is a fossil. Okay. So this one is a dinosaur. This is one single vertebrae from a long neck dinosaur from the end of their tail. And if you look here, you can see that orange stuff. And that is the same thing, basically that like spongy material that was filled in with mud, and then that mud turned into rock. So you can actually see that kind of spongy bone material by looking at the fossil itself. Okay. So the 3 steps to make a fossil, a body fossil, is 1, thing has to die, 2, it has to be buried, and then 3, it has to stay buried for a long time, a long enough time for that mud to compress and turn into rock. So that's one of the reasons you really only find fossils in sedimentary rock. So, any questions on that? No, I saw a couple questions come through chat, so I'm just going to double check and make sure I got you all. Okay, Caligone. Yeah, so there's no, I saw a question about dogs coming up. We don't have, there are really mammals during this time. This is 150 million years ago. So mammals during this time are really small, and they're not like broken up into families that we would recognize today. So the earliest dogs were closer to like, I'm just estimating, I'm not a dog fossil expert, but I would estimate about 50 million years ago.
Yeah, at the beginnings of the carnivores just splitting off at that time, I'd agree.
Yeah, so we're talking 100 million years before that. So these guys are way older. Yeah. So what we're going to do next, which I bet everybody in the building is going to watch me do this too, is we're actually going to climb up on the fossil wall so that you guys can see a little bit closer. If you're here in person, we don't let just the general public climb up on the wall, but we're going to do it together. I'm going to flip the camera around so you guys won't get seasick. Okay. We're going to go up here. Okay. Excuse me, going over here. All right, so we're going to go right up here. And okay. So we're up here on the fossil wall. That's where we just were. You guys can wave to everybody down there. And we're going to get a closer look at some of the fossils. So this should give you guys a little bit of a better close-up of what we were looking at before, which is basically you're seeing all these different fossils that are pushed together, thinking of like the logjam scenario. So there were a bunch of different fossils from all these different dinosaurs mixed in. So we're going to take a look first at this fossil. And I will take any suggestions in the chat for what you guys think this is. Any thoughts on what this fossil could be? It is not a femur. That is a good guess. I will give you a hint. It belongs to this dinosaur right here. Any guesses? By looking at this thing that belongs to this dinosaur. Yeah, so I'm seeing it now. This is a tail spike. You guys got it. So this bone right here, I'm gonna just put my finger on it so you can see how big this is. This is a tail spike from a Stegosaurus. So Stegosaurus was one of the dinosaurs that was here. He's got these 4 tail spikes in his back here that he would have used for protection. And this is a tail spike outside the wall, so you can get a little better idea. This is just a cast. That's why I'm able to hold it up again. But this is a tail spike here as well. So yeah, Stegosaurus have used their tail spikes for protection. About 15% of the wall is made up of Stegosaurus. So many of the bones here are from Stegosaurus. Okay. We also have several fossils of this. This is also from a Stegosaurus. And this is one of its back plates. So you can see that. So he had these back plates on his back here. This is a back plate fossil. It's a little bit of an interesting thing. Does anybody want to take a guess what Stegosaurus used his back plates for? What do you think they were for? Protection. Yeah, so I'm seeing a lot of protection, armor, heat, warmth. Yeah. So the thing is, we have a lot of ideas about what Stegosaurus could have used their back plates for, but we're not really sure, to be totally honest. Probably protection, because these would have provided good protection on his top, but not so much on his sides. So the sides would have been nice and open for a carnivore to come after. And I'm going to turn it this way too. Oh, so you guys can see how skinny it is. Can you guys see that? So yeah, so super skinny. This plate is made out of bone, right? But it's interesting because these back plates were also not attached directly to their spine. So they were kind of like floating bones on this back. So some in the, I saw warmth, a couple people said warmth. One of the other ideas, other than protection, is that Stegosaurus could have used his back plates to help him regulate temperature. So if you see here all these little lines, these are basically veins and blood vessels. Essentially, like a rabbit today has big ears to help them disperse heat. Stegosaurus could have been using their plates to help disperse heat from their body. Generally speaking, the climate was much warmer and wetter than it is today. So that may have been what they were using their plates for as well. There's also been some research recently that they could have been using them as a display, like to show off to other dinosaurs if they're trying to get a mate or something like that. But like I said, we're just not really sure. We don't have enough discoveries to know for sure. So scientists are kind of on different sides of this debate. I see some questions coming in. They're not bendy. They're hard bone. So it would have just been like a hard fossil or a hard bone, just like any other bone in their body. Maybe to scare off other predators. That could have been a thing too, kind of like how cats get all big and they get puffed up when they're trying to be scary. That could have been a thing as well. All right. So the last thing we're going to look at is this from a Stegosaurus. So this is a Stegosaurus skull. You can see that here. I'm going to put him down so we can point at it a little better. So his eyes would have been right here. These other holes are part of what dinosaurs had. It's called an air sac system. Basically, it's like a kind of like a sinus system that we have today. But what you might notice is right here is where his brain would have been. Stegosaurus has a super small brain compared to his body. And even if you look at this little toy, you can see how small his head was compared to his body. So Stegosaurus is not the brightest dinosaur that's ever been. But he didn't really need to be smart. He had these flat teeth that he used to eat plants. And basically they were able to eat plants and didn't have to think about it a whole lot. So generally speaking, the herbivore dinosaurs didn't have as big of a brain as the carnivores because they didn't need to. Yeah. Any questions about a Stegosaurus before we look at some other dinosaur fossils up here? Seeing some chats coming in. Can we see the teeth again? Yeah, I'm going to turn it this way so you can get a little closer look at those teeth. They're flat. So Stegosaurus is really eating plants that were growing close to the ground, kind of like a big cow, basically. Why are there so many Stegosaurus? So because Stegosaurus was just one of the dinosaurs found here. Basically, it's, like I said before, it's a mix of all the different dinosaurs. And I'm going to show you guys in a bit both how long Stegosaurus was compared to a person and the other dinosaurs that are here in the quarry, so you can get a better idea of that. I don't know what its bite pressure was. I don't know that that's been super well studied. Typically, that's better studied among carnivores, just because people are more curious about that. But I don't know off the top of my head what its bite pressure was. Good question.
Yeah, I'll just add, I don't know the answer either, but it does not have big attachments for jaw muscles, and plants usually aren't quite the same as chomping down on, say, a Triceratops. So I don't think it had a big bite pressure to, say, T-Rex or Allosaurus.
Yeah, we'll look at an Allosaurus skull in a little bit here, and you can see the difference in where their jaws attach. And so just take note of that, and we'll take a closer look in a bit. Awesome. They didn't shed plates that we know of. It wasn't like a part of their body that they would be losing and regrowing. So they had their plates potentially their whole life, but We have found fossils of a baby stegosaurus and didn't find any plates or tail spikes. So we don't know if we just didn't find them or if they didn't have them. So we really just need more discoveries to try to figure out some of those things. They're actually, despite having 15% of the quarry B stegosaurus bones, there actually have not been many articulated stegosaurus fossils found ever. So some of these questions are really hard to answer because we just need more discoveries to help figure it out. Awesome. All right, so we're gonna go over here and take a closer look at a couple other things. And let's see here. One thing I did want to show you guys were there are other bits of different things mixed in here. So you can see right here, this is actually a piece of a tree that's been mixed in with all the dinosaur fossils. And if you start looking kind of closely, and I'm going to try to hold this steady, you can just see there's kind of bits of bone really all over the place in here. And so all of those count towards that 1,500 fossils mixed together. There's also one right here. This is a part of a crocodile. So this is part of a back of the crocodile. And basically it's one of those little pieces that just mixed in with all these other bits. All right, so this one right here, any guesses what this big bone is? Either what bone it is or what dinosaur it came from. Seeing a couple things. Yeah, so this is a rib bone. Good guess, you guys. This is just one rib bone, and you can see there's another one up here, just right here. Okay. And there's really a lot of ribs that are all mixed together. And this particular one is from a sauropod, or a long-necked dinosaur, called Apatosaurus. Apatosaurus is actually the same dinosaur as Brontosaurus, if you know that one. Essentially what happened is there were, the two different dinosaurs were discovered in the early 1900s, and they basically discovered the dinosaurs and kind of moved along without really comparing them a lot. And then they eventually figured out that they were the same dinosaur. Really, in the 1990s, they were able to figure that out. So if you know Brontosaurus, you also know Apatosaurus. All right, and I'm gonna flip the camera around also. So you guys can you guys see this big bone right here? Any guesses what this might be? Either what dinosaur or what type of bone it's from. Okay. Seeing some things come in. Horse or skull. Yep. Awesome. And yeah, just to clarify, I saw that some questions come in. So Apatosaurus is now the official name. Apatosaurus was the earlier name. So they went back to the earlier name instead of Brontosaurus, even though everybody knows Brontosaurus. So this big bone is also from Apatosaurus. And if you reach back and touch your neck right here, and you feel that bump on the back of your neck, if you feel that, this is that same bone from a Apatosaurus. So just for some scale. Okay, so that we're actually looking at like the bottom of this vertebrae. So this is where it would have attached to like another vertebrae here and up here. Okay, but this is just a single neck vertebrae to give you some scale. Apatosaurus was about the size of 5 elephants put together. So just a really massive long neck dinosaur. When we climb down off the wall, I'll show you guys a skull from a Apatosaurus so you can get an idea of what their teeth look like. Essentially, they use their teeth kind of like a rake, where they would just be raking leaves off the top of trees. So basically, they were just eating as much food as they possibly could to just survive. Yeah, so they were really eating a lot of food. All right. We're going to look at one more dinosaur from up here. I'm going to flip the camera around. So this dinosaur, anybody want to take a guess what this guy is? I'll give you a hint. It is not a T-Rex. Okay, I'm seeing a couple of raptors coming in. Isn't good. All right. So this is not a velociraptor. It is not a long-armed T-Rex, although that is kind of a funny guess as well. This dinosaur is called an Allosaurus. And I'm gonna move the camera up here so you guys can see what an Allosaurus looks like. Okay, can you guys see that? Yeah. So Allosaurus was really the dominant predator at this time of when dinosaurs were around. For some perspective, the Allosaurus is about half the size of a T-Rex. So T-Rex is really a much bigger dinosaur. And for some perspective of time, the T-Rex is actually closer in time to us today than T-Rex is close to these dinosaurs. So I'm going to say that again. T-Rex is closer in time to us today than T-Rex is close to these dinosaurs. Okay. So T-Rex was around about 65 million years ago. These dinosaurs were around about 150 million years ago. So Allosaurus is not a direct relative of the T-Rex, but they're in the same general family of dinosaurs, that they were both carnivore dinosaurs. Velociraptor was also around about the time as the T-Rex as well. Okay. So I see some questions about like how big is a T-Rex. So double this Allosaurus would have been the size of a T-Rex. All right, let's see. Yeah, I see the good questions coming in. Looks like you're going to cover them a lot later, and we'll come back to those questions at the end here as well. All right, so back to the Allosaurus. I want to hold this one up. This is an Allosaurus claw, so you guys get an idea of that. It looks like a velociraptor claw that you might think of, but they basically had 3 fingers. They were really using their arms to grab their prey, and they were able to use those claws as well to hold on to them. Certainly a carnivore in terms of teeth and claws, would have eaten meat, and it's hard to know. We think they may have also been scavenging, potentially scavenging other dinosaurs that had already died. There's basically, you can tell that by looking at their bite strength. If they had a really big bite strength, they might have been able to do that. But we just don't have enough discoveries for that either. So there's a lot of stuff about dinosaurs that we just don't know. We can take a good guess, but we don't know for sure. Awesome. So we're going to climb down the wall, unless you guys have any other questions. We're going to take a closer look at this Allosaurus skull over here. Do you guys have anything else you'd like to see while we're up on the wall? No. Okay. All right, so I'm gonna keep you guys flipped around. Like I said, I'm gonna not look at you while I'm doing this. And we're gonna climb back down the wall. Carefully. I'm doing this with my iPad in my hands. And while I'm doing that, why do you guys think, you guys tell me in the chat, why do you think it'd be really rare to find a skull of a dinosaur? Why do you think that might be a rare thing to find? I see a couple people answering. Skulls are fragile. Skulls are scavenged. Maybe. Right. Yeah. So basically, skulls are they're essentially really fragile, and the connection between your neck and skull is pretty small in terms of dinosaurs as well. So you may get like an entire skeleton of a dinosaur, but just not their skull, because if it was a river scenario, that skull could have just washed away. It also can be crushed really easily. So it's pretty difficult to actually find a skull. Many dinosaurs will find other parts of it and just not find a skull. That's why that Apatosaurus brontosaurus thing happened, because they never found a skull for a brontosaurus until they realized it was the same thing. So that some of that confusion came from there. So to look at the Allosaurus skull, there you go. This one is the real fossil. So this Allosaurus skull you're looking at is one of only 4 Allosaurus skulls found in the world. So it is the best preserved skull we have of any Allosaurus. It actually has not really been flattened. Their skulls are actually this narrow. So I know it's kind of hard with the glare, but hopefully you guys can see that. And you can also see a bunch of their teeth pretty easily here as well. And you can probably also see the glue that is holding some parts of this skull together. Because it is so fragile, it has all these little pieces. This skull has been glued back together as well. I see some questions coming in, so I'm going to go to that. Okay, let's see. So this skull was found in the Morrison Formation. This skull was found here. I'm going to show you guys a map of the historic excavations here in a minute. And this skull was actually found right here in the quarry. Yes, and it is special glue that's used to put the bones back together. It's specifically made for fixing fossils. Yeah, we also have one of the other skulls from the Allosaurus. We're going to talk about that in a minute. That is the, quote, new species of Allosaurus that has been discovered. So I'm going to flip you guys around again over here so we can talk about the 10 different kinds of dinosaurs that have been found here. Just to give you guys a perspective of that and the historic excavations that occurred in the past. I go grab the things.
While she's doing that, I'll just add that I know there's a awesome Allosaurus that was found in Wyoming, and I'm pretty sure it had the skull with it. So we've got 2 of the skulls from Dinosaur National Monument, 1 from Wyoming. And my classroom, I actually have the Stegosaurus plate. You can see a cast of as well, how thin it doesn't, may not come out too well, but you can see the background, how big it is. That thing would actually be about 2-3 feet high. And we've got the same cast of a Stegosaurus tail spike in the front table as well. Allosaurus claw is right here.
Perfect. All right, so I'm going to show you guys this one. These are the 10 different kinds of dinosaurs that have been found here. And I know it's backwards for you, so I'm just going to go through them. So the first one, then you can also see the person for scale, just to give you an idea of that. So the different dinosaurs that have been found here, Diplodocus, Barosaurus, Apatosaurus, Camarasaurus. Camarasaurus is the most common dinosaur that we found here. So this is the most common one in the quarry. Stegosaurus, we've talked about a bunch. Camptosaurus and Dryosaurus are both really small dinosaurs, so we've only found a couple bones from them overall in the quarry. And then 3 different kinds of carnivores. So Torvosaurus, Allosaurus, and Ceratosaurus. And Allosaurus is the most common of those. Any questions about that? Catherine, I saw you unmuting, so I wasn't sure if you wanted to jump in.
You're good.
Okay, cool. So I referred a little bit to the excavations that happened here. And so the kind of crazy thing about what we have here with all the dinosaur fossils is the wall that's here today is about 1/4 of the fossils that used to be here. Many, many other fossils were excavated and removed here in the early 1900s. So I'm going to try to show you this map. Okay, so this map is the historic quarry excavations. Okay. This under the red line right here is what you're looking at today. Okay. So all of the rest of this was excavated and removed. The first discovery that happened here was found by Earl Douglas. He was a paleontologist who was out looking for dinosaur bones in the Morrison Formation. And he found 8 tail bones from a Apatosaurus that were articulated and just sticking out of the rock just like that. And then this is showing you where they were discovered. So that happened in 1909. And from 1909 to 1924, they excavated and removed all of these fossils. They all went to the Carnegie Museum in Pittsburgh first, because that's who was paying for it, basically. That's why you may see things that say Carnegie Quarry, because that's where those fossils went. And then they were distributed to different museums from there. So you may have seen them if you've ever been to some of the big museums in the country before, like at the Smithsonian or the American Museum of Natural History in New York. So there's quite a few fossils from here that are actually there today. Okay. And then to give you kind of an idea of that timeline of what happened here, they excavated from 1909 to 1924, but they left this piece intact. Okay, they did not excavate this piece. They enclosed it in a building in the 1950s, and then from the 1950s to the 1990s, they actually excavated inside this building to remove the rocks over the top of the fossils that are here. So that's how this building came to be. Okay. Real quick, I'm going to take you guys on a quick walk to see the Allosaurus, the other Allosaurus, and then we should have time for questions right after that. All right, I'll put you guys around again. Oops, sorry, fingers over it. So this is the Allosaurus. So the other Allosaurus we looked at was Allosaurus fragilis. This Allosaurus is called Allosaurus jamatsoni. And this specimen was actually discovered here in Dinosaur National Monument in the 1990s. So you can see this is a cast replica of it. The really unique thing about the Allosaurus jamatsoni is that it was found in this really lifelike position, and its skull was still here. So you can see its skull actually detached there. Sorry, the light's kind of bad. But its skull was still intact, and we were actually able to prepare like around the back side of this to see the other side of its skull, which looks like this. So Allosaurus jamatsoni was actually described just recently in a paper that came out. So it was found in the early 1990s, but wasn't described until recently. So with that, I think we're gonna take some time for questions because I knew we were gonna be a little bit crunched for time. But we still have about 15 minutes for any questions. So I'm gonna walk back over here and look through your list of questions. But also, if you wanted to unmute and ask them, now would be the time to do that.
I'm going to let you guys type in questions for a minute or two. And yeah, this has been really great. If there aren't any questions, then I'll read out some of the ones that have been submitted. But if you want to unmute, you can go ahead and do so. And you don't have to worry, I'll edit people out of the video, so you can even turn your camera on if you want. Looks like we have a few things coming up in the chat.
I'm just getting you all situated in my little stand here. Okay. So let me look at the chat and see what's going on. All right. Okay, so it looks like the dinosaur teeth question came up, but that may have been answered. Basically, dinosaurs, yes, would grow their teeth back. Dinosaurs had a lot of different teeth that they could grow back, essentially like sharks, but they weren't like in a row like sharks. They were just basically able to grow them back. Depending on the dinosaur was how long it took them to replace their teeth. Yeah. Let's see, bigger holes next to their eyes because of their muscles. Yeah, so a lot of the Allosaurus skull has many holes in it because it's that the air sac system that we mentioned. It's kind of like a sinus system. So that's what a lot of the holes in their skull are from. Okay, what is the difference between the Allosaurus jamatsoni and the Allosaurus fragilis? Was one of the questions that came up. So the Allosaurus jamatsoni is a little bit older. It's about 5 million years older than the Allosaurus fragilis, and it's a little bit smaller. So that's kind of two of the big reasons that's a different species. Could you describe a typical day on the job with someone in my job? Every day is a little bit different, to be completely honest. My job has a lot to do with education, like I mentioned before. So typically I do some kind of education program, not counting COVID time. This year we haven't really been able to do any education programs other than virtually. So that's really how we've been doing that. But as I mentioned before, my main job is like taking what our paleontologist says and translating that to people just like your average visitors who are coming here. So it can be really fun, and it can also be really challenging because it's generally working with people who may not have any understanding of geology or dinosaurs at all, and you're kind of translating those big concepts to help people make this a more meaningful visit. I've been a park ranger for 12 years. So I worked with a lot of different national parks. Dinosaur is my 4th park, and I didn't know anything about dinosaurs until I worked here. So that's kind of a fun thing. Let's see. Percentage of fossils that have skin attached, I would say very little. We really don't find skin on dinosaur fossils. Really, it depends on the environment. In this particular environment, the river scenario, we're not really finding that at all. One thing we have found is skin impressions, which is basically like there was mud, a dinosaur died, and left its impression in the mud, right? And so we have a skin impression, but we don't have like the actual skin itself. There's some different scenarios where like dinosaurs were covered in volcanic ash and that sort of thing, that was like a really fine material, where it kind of drifted down and covered them that way. So a much calmer, much quieter environment than a river, where you might be able to find dinosaur skin and dinosaur feathers. Let's see. Any other important layers found at Dinosaur? Yeah, so there's many different places that here at the monument. I mentioned we have 23 different rock layers, and many of them have fossils in them, but they also span a lot of time. So we actually have a lot of geologic time represented. So probably the other most famous formation, we do have the Entrada sandstone, which is like the same that forms Arches National Park. And we do also have the Navajo sandstone. Here is called the Nugget Formation, which forms really big cliffs in Zion National Park as well. So we have a lot of rock layers that are similar across the Colorado Plateau. Let's see. Let's see. A bit of background how I became to do this job. Yeah, so I grew up in New Jersey. That's where I'm from. And I went to school in Pennsylvania. And I got a job, an internship with the National Park Service when I was in college. So my first job was doing education with Glacier National Park, which is up in Montana. And I kind of got hooked on it because I got to hike for my job. I got to work outside and share things that I found really exciting with other people. So that's when I decided I wanted to pursue the Park Service as a career. And so I took a lot of classes. Like I said, I took environmental science was my major. So I took a lot of classes in school that actually really did help me be able to translate some of this information to other folks. So that's a little quick snippet of how I came to be here.
This is kind of related, actually.
Yeah.
We had several people submitted questions to me before this, wanting to know if you had a favorite part of the park.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so my favorite part of the park, other than here, this is a really wonderful place to work. Basically, you see people walk in the door here and kind of just, their jaws usually drop open. So this being in here is pretty fun. But also the Echo Park area, if you've ever been here to Dinosaur, that's where those two major rivers come together. And it's a really scenic area, but it's also kind of off the beaten path. So we don't get as many visitors there as well. So that's my favorite place in the park. All right. So yeah, I'm going back to the chat. Let's see. So do you think some of the dinosaurs here have died as a group? Some of the dinosaurs here probably died in a flood, like when the water came back. Some of them may have died in that flood. But most of them probably died a long time before they were actually buried here. We know that because some of the fossils here actually have insect boreholes in them. So like little tiny holes for like termites and that sort of thing. So they were basically laying out exposed to the air for a long time. So they didn't all die at the same time, and they didn't die in the same place. The river also moved them together. Yeah. Let's see. All right. Okay. Have you ever had anybody trying to steal any of the fossils since they're displayed? Yes. So that is an issue that we have. That's why the building is secured. That's why the Allosaurus has its own special box, special alarm system here. We also have our own law enforcement, which is like essentially park rangers that are police, and that's their main job, is visitor and resource protection. So they're protecting people, but also our resources, so the fossils that are here. We have had vandalism on some of the trails out. Basically, there's some fossils that can be found outside the building, and we have had instances of vandalism in those places, but not here inside the building. So, good question, though. Let's see. If I have one, what is my favorite dinosaur? My favorite dinosaur is Stegosaurus. I think Stegosaurus is super cute for whatever reason. It's not a really rational reason to like Stegosaurus, but I think he's cute, and it's just kind of one that I really like talking about because I think he's fun. Let's see. There's questions about permafrost, but it looks like Catherine kind of answered that. Let's see. If any of the visitors accidentally found fossils and could they turn it in? Yeah, so we asked people if they find fossils here to just tell us about it. So not like pick it up and move it and bring it to us. Because once they do that, they're taking it out of context. Another kind of interesting thing about our fossils here is that we do have a park paleontologist here who's in charge of our museum curation. So we have a whole museum collection here. And basically, after we take a fossil out of the ground, we essentially have to take care of that fossil forever. It's ours to take care of, and we are responsible for it. So in some cases, it's better to actually leave the fossil if it's not being like eroded away or being damaged in any way. Sometimes it can be better for us just to leave it instead of excavating it. Let's see. How busy does the park get in a normal year? Yeah, so on a non-COVID year, typically we get about 2,000 people a day in this building in the summertime. So we're open year-round, and the only days we're closed are Christmas, New Year's, and Thanksgiving Day. And people are coming from all around the country and all around the world. This year we've still had a lot of people traveling to get here.
I had somebody ask about volunteering, if anybody could volunteer at parks.
Yeah. So there is, I don't know how familiar you guys are with government websites. There are two websites that are really important for looking at both volunteering and jobs in national parks. They are volunteer.gov and usajobs.gov. So volunteer.gov, you can actually search for all national parks. If you have a particular interest, like you're interested in dinosaurs or you're interested in something else, you can look that up on that volunteer.gov. I would say the most park rangers start their job somehow as a volunteer because it's a really good way to get your foot in the door. Yeah, good question. All right, I think I'm almost through the ones on the chat. We don't really have a lot of chemical fossils here. Most of our fossils are either body or trace fossils, so we're not finding really like carbonized things, generally speaking. Yeah, no, we don't really have anything stored in amber. Unfortunately, we can't really have the Jurassic Park scenario here. It's just not really common in this area to find that sort of thing. Awesome. So I think I just plowed through all the chat questions. What else you guys got?
How often do people find, I'm looking at the list I have here, how often do people actually come and say they found a fossil? Visitors to the park?
Not very often, to be honest. We do have about 400 known sites that we know of already outside of this building. So it's not very often that people come in and tell us that they found a fossil that we don't already know about. Certainly it can happen, and so our paleontologists make sure to always check that out. But it doesn't happen very often that people are telling us about something we don't already know about.
And we had somebody want to know how many people work at the park and how many paleontologists do you
Yeah,
have?
so Dinosaur is a medium-sized park, meaning we have about 40 year-round employees, and that bumps up to like about 70 in the summertime.
Yeah. So those are folks who come in seasonally?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot of jobs are summer seasonal, where we have people come on for our peak season, but we're a little bit unique because we are open all year.
And do you have a paleontologist or two on the staff?
We do, yeah. We have a paleontologist and an archaeologist, an ecologist, and a wildlife biologist.
And is it fair to say that most parks you've worked at, well, I've worked with folks, so I know about the biologists, but how many parks actually have paleontologists and or archaeologists?
So to be a paleontologist specifically at one park, it typically needs to have some kind of fossil resource, right? So I worked at a really tiny park called Fossil Butte National Monument. Yeah, it's really small. There were only 6 staff there, and one of them was a paleontologist. So
I'll just give a plug when we can travel again. John Day Fossil Beds in Oregon are world-class site. They do not have any dinosaurs, but they have some amazing mammals that were buried in volcanic ash deposits from the early Cascades.
Yeah.
Well, I know we're running up right against an hour, but I really appreciate your time. This has been awesome. Will we be seeing you again tomorrow?
I'll be here again tomorrow. Yep.
Okay.
So thanks, guys. Hopefully we can see you in person sometime when it's not a pandemic. So I appreciate you guys sticking with me, and hopefully we'll get to see you here in person sometime.
Yeah, that was really awesome. Let's give a big thank you and applause. You've got a bunch coming in chat, and I never would have had the chance to climb up on the wall myself. So all of that was great.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Well, thank you guys so much, and we will see you tomorrow.
And I'll stick around in case anybody has any questions you'd like to ask.
Yeah,
either about the class or as we are, or about this field trip we just had. But I'm gonna wave goodbye and stop recording here. So.
All right, sounds good.